We are recording. So if you just acknowledge that, we are ready to go. So happy to see so many of you. I think I know a lot of these faces. I'm Madeleine Takour. I'm president and CEO of the Children's Movement of Florida. And we are really thrilled to be here today to launch Florida's Early Learning Roadmap. A real momentous occasion after many months of work, many meetings filled with smiles and tears and much participation from all of you. So as we get started, I just want to ask you to continue introducing yourselves in the chat so we know who's here, so everyone sees who's here. And just want to pull up a poll so we get a sense of who's in the room. So if you could answer this, a little bit about who you are. And there are two questions, so you scroll down after you answer the first one. And then we'll be able to see as we get started here who's in the room and how you've all been involved with the Future Project. Y bienvenidos a todos que nos están escuchando en español. We have Spanish interpretation today, so welcome to anyone who's joining us in Spanish. Apreta el globo abajo de la pantalla si necesita traducción. This has been a pillar of ours throughout the Future Project of making sure to be inclusive of all our Spanish-speaking families throughout the state. So I will ask the back end here if we are ready or if we want to give it another minute on these responses, but we will show you what we've seen on the poll. All right, so we've got a lot of community-based organizations and a good mix of parents and educators, and a real mix, but a lot of you, almost 60% are new to the Future Project. So we're thrilled that you're here to learn what we've come to. So I think with that, we can pull up our presentation and dive right in here with a few of our ground rules. So I mentioned already, we've got simultaneous translation for anyone who's joined us and needs that. We've already asked you to introduce yourselves in the chat and tell us who you are. We love seeing your faces. So in this group, I guess we don't have to tell you that. We will keep using the chat as we go through this meeting. So keep using that to share reactions and ideas. And feel free to speak up, but do please mute when you are not speaking. If we can go to the next slide, I just want to take a moment to recognize one of our partners and dedicate this meeting to Miss Terry. Some of you may have known Miss Terry Rutherford. I first met her as the grandmother of Liberty City, a community here in Miami. She is the smiling face you see in the center of these two pictures, and a force in her community. Someone always defending children, began the meetings by asking, and how are the children? Because you know that's sort of the most essential question. And as we were finalizing the roadmap and getting ready for this last week, we got a call that she had passed away, and just wanted to be grounded and thinking of her and thinking of her approach always for the children, for the teachers, for her community, and for the whole state. So we miss you, Miss Terry, and just dedicating this day to her. So thank you for that. And then we'll tell you a bit more about the Future Project and what we've been up to over the last little more than 18 months. So those of you who've been with us since the beginning, you know this whole thing began with an idea. imagine our future when each child in Florida has the early learning opportunities that they need to thrive. And from the beginning, we wanted this to be grounded in parent and educator perspectives. So phase one was our listening tour for several months last spring and summer, I guess into November, that's the fall. We went all around the state having small group dinners for the most part with parents and educators, asking their perspectives. We had fathers, mothers, grandparents, other caregivers, and what we heard from them, we put together in some feedback from that tour. And we put together a steering committee of folks all across the state, a bilingual steering committee, again, with a mix of stakeholders. And that group took what we heard on the listening tour and turned it into recommendations. Then we went back to all of you. So many of you over the last several months participated in our community feedback sessions to say, this recommendation doesn't sound quite right, or we don't like your use of that word, or you're missing this entire idea. And so if you joined us in that part of the project, what you will see today, I hope you see reflected all that you shared with us. Because after this whole process, more than 850 people throughout the state, a good number of them fathers, mothers, and educators, we now have this roadmap to share with you. So if we go to the next slide, please. I want to recognize our steering committee. This is the one time we were all able to get together in person at a retreat in Orlando last December, and you get a feel for all the different kinds of people who were part of this work. As I think back to the community feedback sessions, I also want to mention just all of the perhaps unexpected folks who came out. We had health professionals and lawyers and bankers and law enforcement and librarians and K-12 teachers and early learning teachers and funders and policy professionals and state agencies. And a lot of that was also represented here with a focus on parents and educators. And so you'll hear a little bit more from a few of our steering committee members as we continue today, but just want to recognize them and thank them for their work, because this was quite intense as we put this together. Next slide. So also our project team, just to recognize the faces that have worked most closely on this. I think most of you know my colleague Rocio Velasquez, who's our Vice President of Statewide Engagement, our former colleague Keisha Jenkins, who was core to the project team, Maureen and Hamilton from Resourceful Consulting, who you'll meet a little bit later, Talithia Edwards, who's based in Tallahassee and was our parent engagement consultant, Mapi Garcia, based in Miami, who was our consultant for Spanish-speaking families, and then Nikki Martin-Bynum and Jeanette Gordon with Seek Higher Ground, who helped us create a really intentional feedback process. So just want to recognize them and have you see their beautiful faces. And then one more thing, just showing you the cover of our roadmap. So that is what we are here today to do, is to launch this. Want to thank our sponsors, Helios, who supported us from the beginning and got this work going. The Charles and Marjorie Barancic Foundation out of Sarasota, who came in at the end to support our community feedback tour and will continue to support some work looking at implementation of the recommendations. And Florida Blue, whose support contributed to all of our listening sessions throughout the state, allowed us to make sure we could provide food and childcare and mitigate some of the barriers that might stop parents and educators from participating. And then so many of you, I just want to say this is not an exhaustive list of logos. If you know you helped us and you don't see it here, we apologize, but just this is many of the folks who've helped us all throughout the state. And it is just really important as we celebrate and present the roadmap to acknowledge how much this is from all of you who participated. And so with that, I will turn it over to Rocio to share a little bit more about the rest of our time together. Oops. And there we go. Over to you, Rocio.
Thank you very much. So let me take care first of something. We received an email, Madeleine, if you can check that from Kimberly. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I'm as excited as Madeleine is and as the whole team that has been working on this project are. And many people register for this meeting, and we are really excited to see all the interest, and especially seeing all the interest from new people that has not been involved, because this is exactly what we need. So throughout the work that we have been doing on listening to the families, to the parents, to the mothers, the fathers, all the caregivers, all the preschool teachers, we identified that there were 4 key components, 4 big topics that were recurrent in our conversations. And we decided to divide them in these 4 areas that you're going to see represented in the roadmap. So the first one is thriving parents, and you might have seen these same topics with different language before, but because of the feedback that we received, we evaluated all those ideas and changed some of this wording. So that's part of the first changes we start doing after the feedback. So when we speak throughout the roadmap about thriving parents, this is because we recognize that parents and caregivers are the child's first teacher, and we want them to be supported in order for them to be able to support their children. So that's the whole idea under this thriving parents component. Then we go to the impactful learning experiences. We understood and we heard from the preschool teachers and also from the parents that they want to see joy in the classroom. They want to see hands-on activities happening. They want to be involved. They want interactions. And sometimes the burden of fulfilling many requirements are limiting the educators to have those experiences and to provide those experiences to the children. So we want to go back to the basics and help them have those impactful learning experiences and help also the kids have joy in the early learning spaces. Number 3 is a respected workforce. We understand also that we have this workforce behind the workforce, that nothing can be done in a community, in a society, if we don't have the right people in our early learning spaces taking care of our children. But as one of the things that we identified is, as much as they want better compensation and as much as they want professional hands-on development, they also are looking to be respected by the community and to be acknowledged for the professionals they are. And we can start doing that right away. So part of a big component in this roadmap is to identify the need of the workforce in the early learning field to be respected. And number 4 is about a well-coordinated resource and data-driven system, because we know that so far, if we call it a system, early learning in our state is still a maze. Like, there are different parts of it, and we need to get to know too much to understand really how it works. And what we would like to do with these recommendations is identifying the ways that we can streamline it and have all the resources connected. So part of the recommendations will take us there. These 4 components are all important. We have been saying that this is not a menu, this is a recipe. So there's no one thing that is more important than the other. And that's the way we want to look at it. We can go to the next slide. Within all of these conversations, we identify things that were not part of the recommendations strictly, but were overall things that we wanted to guide this implementation of these recommendations. And those are the ones that you will find as guiding principles in our roadmap. The first thing we realize is that relationships are the foundation of any change we want to do on early learning. We hear from the parents, we hear from the teachers, we heard from the early learning center owners and directors, from the agency peoples, from the nonprofits, from the community leaders. Everywhere we heard the people wants to be connected. So that's why we need to work throughout this project and throughout this program to implement ways that we can be connected and to build those relationships and for them to be strong relationships between each other. We also identify that there's a need of the adequate funding in all of this field, right? So many of us that are involved in this work, we identify that right away, and we know that we need more support in the invest more in the early learning field. We also identify that high expectations, especially from the professionals in the area, are coupled with sufficient support. So you cannot ask much of a teacher if you are not supporting them enough, right? And this is where the support is key when you are expecting quality and when you are expecting great things to happen. We also want to balance that with the fact that the support needs to be there in order for that to happen. Also, this was a conversation that we had several times in our feedback sessions. How are you going to get there, right? How are you going to help the families to feel supported if they are not meeting their basic needs? So we also acknowledge that this is something that needs to happen, and that parents, fathers, mothers, and other caregivers like grandparents need to have their basic needs met in order for them to support their children and thrive. And then another aspect that was recurrent throughout the conversations is the mental health aspect, not just mental health and early developmental screenings for the children, yes, but also mental health for the teachers. The teachers were craving for those spaces to have conversations about their experiences as teachers. The teachers were craving for those spaces to vent about what they are dealing with. They requested us to come back. And same with the parents. Some parents had told us, I have never been in a group. I have never been in a meeting. My child is 1 year old and has not met other children until now because of COVID. We've had that experience. And my mental health is suffering. So I need that kind of help. I also need to identify when is the right moment for me to get the help. So throughout the conversations, everybody who was involved in these meetings expressed the need for mental health support in different ways. So that's the reason why we put it as a guiding principle. And then throughout the roadmap, you will find these two icons, which are the ones that represent the symbols that represent how to best enact change. So when we need government action or a policy change, you will find this little blue icon. And if it's something more related to a community action from civic organizations, then you will find the little red people. So that's a little quick note on what you will find in the roadmap. We can go to the next slide. And then the structure for the roadmap. You will find in each of the topics, in each of the key components, you will find our goal, then a little more breakdown about the issue and what it is. You will also find the specific recommendations with some strategies and the little icons that I just mentioned. And you will find some quotes from our listening tour sessions that are related to that specific topic. So that's what you should expect to find in the roadmap. Let's keep going, please.
And now I think it's time to dig in, and we want you to hear from 4 members of our steering committee as we go through each of these. So let's go first to the next slide and to Maria Somera. Welcome, Maria. You are muted. There you go.
Hi, everyone. I'm so really honored to be here. Well, I'm Maria Somera, and it's amazing how I used to believe I was just a mom of 3 kids, and suddenly I discovered we have a voice. And suddenly, just by taking the first step into engagement, it has been a wonderful journey. So I just want to tell you, like, don't be just a mom or just a teacher or just this or just that. We are all voices. And when we get together, we can shake the world. There's one quote that I love, like, it's from Albert Pike, and it says, what we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others and the world remains, and it's immortal. So the children's movement of Florida is really something that I know that it's going to be for the future, not of our kids, but the growth of our families and the progress of our communities and all nonprofits. So thank you for this opportunity. Now I'm here and I would love to tell you a little bit about the thriving parents, right? One of the main thing is our goal, like all parents, including mothers, fathers, and other caregivings and families can access the resources and support they need to help their children thrive, including, like Rocio mentioned, mental health resources, caregiver support systems, and affordable year-round early learning that meets the unique development needs of their children. So, expand parent engagement strategies, correct? This is part of our goals. Like, 1, expand parent engagement strategies in family-centered spaces with trusted guides for parents.
You can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about some of the things we came up. And one is this: expand parent engagement strategies in family-centered space with trusted guides for parents. This includes not only information for parents, but also better parent engagement practices and expectations, as well as parent advocacy and leadership development training. The second one, number B, is increase opportunities for parents and providers who have direct experience to co-create the policies that impact them. We can do this with regular feedback loops and authentic family partnerships. Perhaps parents sitting on early learning coalition boards, for example, or encouraging parents and early learning professionals to run for office. Again, just remember, you are a voice. You're not just this or that. And number C, expand availability and accessibility of services to support mental health, economic well-being, and overall success of mothers, fathers, and other caregivings. And what this means is support groups, affordable or free mental health screenings and therapies, and of course, policies that support financial security, preventing benefit cliffs, where parents lose benefits, that can cancel or even cancel out increase in earnings. So next is going to be Sasha, that is going to share furthermore.
And actually, I'm going to be covering Sasha. She had an emergency this morning. And life is life. So she needed to take care of her child and excuse herself. But she has been a great also steering committee member. She's, besides being an early childhood teacher, she's also a mother and has a lot of good input to all the different conversations we've had. So hope that her child gets well soon. And I'm gonna be summarizing the second key component, which is impactful learning experiences. For this one, we set as the goal that every teacher has the tools to provide every child with engaging, hands-on, high-quality, developmentally appropriate, differentiated, and purposely playful early learning experiences that foster the magic of exploration, and learning as a foundation for her healthy early childhood development and school readiness. Within this goal, or to get to this goal, we consider important these ideas and action steps. Move toward a fully funded early learning experience, and we think that to get there, we need sustainable funding streams coming from the federal, the state, private sectors, and that considers increasing per child funding levels. So that was one of the big things here. And this to apply from birth to 5. The second strategy for the recommendation for this goal is to increase understanding of the importance of early learning among policymakers and the public. We want to create more legislative champions. There are some of them already in the field, but we need more of them. So we want that to increase, and also more awareness of the importance of early learning within the community, which is important. We also think about this as the key to shift our minds into that respected workforce that we are also discussing. And so everything connects one thing with the other. And then improve training, professional development, and expert support for early learning teachers. We heard, for example, that teachers want more hands-on training. They want to be visited in their classrooms and want to learn by doing. I remember one of the conversations I was facilitating, and educators starting a conversation around, we don't want to go to conferences anymore. We don't want to miss the classroom in order to learn. We want for someone to come to us and help us with the group of children that we're working with and guide us on how we need to deal with specific situations that happen within the classroom, and not go and sit in a chair for a day where we need to we skip the school day or some of it, and then we come back and we don't know how to implement. So this is kind of like what we are summarizing here, the need of changing the way of doing things and changing the way on how we understand professional development for the preschool teachers. And I think we're ready to continue.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us this afternoon. I am Sharon Miller. I'm a visionary educator in the field of education, particularly in the area of early childhood education. I want to share just a little with you what has drawn me to this project. As I entered early childhood education, the arena, about 6-7 years ago, I could feel that this arena was shifting, getting ready to change. So I thought we were kind of at an apex or a fork in the road. And I thought through this project, we have an excellent opportunity to define the future direction of early childhood education for the state of Florida. So as you have heard the other 2 goals and the objectives, for me, it looks like a wheel in my head. There are spokes on a wheel, and then there is the hub of that wheel. So I would propose that our goals and objectives are the spokes in that wheel, and the hub is the opportunity where we have to input policy and procedure that will help to strengthen the field of early childhood education. So at this point, I want to share the overall goal of this section of the project. And it is a respected workforce. You know, without the people, without the teachers, it doesn't work. I think that was one of the most astounding kind of facts that came out of the COVID pandemic. Without teachers, it does not work. So the teachers and directors, who are the backbone of this early learning system, should be recognized, respected, and supported with ample training, competitive compensation. I wish I had a highlighter that I could highlight that one. And benefits that support them in making a living as career early learning professionals. A super important aspect, the people that makes this industry work. Our objectives underneath this goal is a greater public awareness, appreciation, and respect for the important, challenging work of early learning teachers. All you have to do is visit a mom who's taking care of her children on a daily basis, 3 or 4 in a household, and a mom is trying to do all of this stuff. Then you see teachers at work. So that public awareness, that appreciation, to let you know that this is really an important piece of this project. Stronger career paths and pipelines into the early learning profession. Yes, we've got to strengthen the stair steps, getting our early learning professionals to what we would consider master teachers, and improve compensation. This is one of the lowest paid areas when we begin to look at career ladders in the workforce. And those first 5 years of a child's life will determine whether they're successful readers when they get to 3rd grade. So we have to get it right in that 0 to 5 time span. We also need to include a statewide campaign that will celebrate teachers and the greater community recognition, such as the Early Learning Teacher of the Year, for example, and supports for teachers to address persistent challenges facing their students, dual language learners, challenging behaviors, the impact of poverty as well. And again, the stronger career paths. That is something that we're going to absolutely have to get right, because the better trained teachers are, the better outcomes for the students. And again, compensation. Compensation is a pivotal point that we cannot get around. We must begin to pay our teachers for what they do in the classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Hello, I am Mia Jones. I'm the Early Childhood Coordinator and Pritzker Children's Initiative Fellow with the Children's Trust of Alachua County, which is located in Gainesville. Starting in 2021, the Children's Trust of Alachua County provided, alongside the Greater Gainesville Chamber of Commerce, partnered to provide a platform where local business leaders and public policy decision makers and early learning center owners and operators gathered and explored the business of the childcare industry in Alachua County. We recognized that families were navigating the accessibility and quality and affordability of childcare with entering and re-entering or remaining in the workforce, and that childcare businesses were closing and struggling to maintain talent. We also recognized that our economy and community needed quality childcare to thrive. And I think Dr. Miller said it best. We need teachers. We can't do the work without teachers. The Future Project kind of showed us that we're not unique in our challenges and our concerns at all. And after participating in the Future Project, we launched the Early Childhood Learning Collaborative to continue building a foundation towards an equitable and supported early childhood education system in our county. Participating in the Future Project has helped propel the mission forward and provide the microphone for our community voice to be heard alongside all of our other communities in Florida. And it has gathered diversity of thoughts, wishes, and needs to help elevate one voice, one mission to drive policy and conversation, statewide and even onward. So the fourth key component is well-coordinated, resourced, and data-driven system. And the goal of that component is all parents and educators and other family service providers work together communicate regularly, coordinate effectively in an aligned, well-funded, data-driven, accessible, effective early learning system that supports the growth, development, and overall success of all young children in Florida. A mouthful, but definitely needs to be stated. The recommendations that we are making, first one is equitable access to early learning programs that are accessible, affordable, and responsive to family needs. This includes increased funding for more childcare options to cover more families like non-traditional hours, dual language learners, children at risk of learning delays or diagnosed with disabilities. We also need more specialized instruction and therapies for children who need them. The second one is greater connection among the adults who are regularly interacting with and or serving children and families. We can get there by having a clear system map that shows the role each organization or service plays and that helps identify gaps or duplication of services, as well as greater connections between health, education, and social service programs. We also need to streamline enrollment processes across state and federal programs with increased eligibility levels that match Florida's economic reality. The third one is data-driven decision-making to support 100% kindergarten readiness. This means we need to compile better data, ask new questions from the data about how to better identify and address disparities, and of course, share the data appropriately among policymakers, service partners, and stakeholders.
And like you said, Mia, it's a mouthful, but it needs to be said. And so this is sort of the Cliff Notes version of our roadmap. And I think you'll soon see in the chat the link to download the whole thing with all those little icons Rocio was mentioning earlier. We'd love to take, I think we are on time to take a couple minutes of questions or comments. You know, so many of you have been part of this and just want to give folks a space either in the chat or to open your mics. We've got time for a couple of those. But I just want to acknowledge that, you know, we know a lot of this is what we have been talking about over the years, what folks in the field have known that we have needed. I think you'll find in there perhaps a couple of new ideas too. But we believe it's so critical to have it on paper in one place and with a community that has been built to support getting this done. And so if anybody wants to speak up, we are waiting for you to open your mics. And Maria.
I know you would say like, she's part of it and she's asking questions. Well, we all have questions. So there's no wrong question nor like bad timing for a question. Like, I would like to know when is this going to be presented to, you know, our governmental like authorities or what's the plan there?
Yeah, so many of you know that we already had state officials, you know, Division of Early Learning, legislators, others participate in the feedback tour, and they were invited today. I didn't scroll through all the list of all of you who are here to know if anyone is here. If you are, please feel free to speak up. But this will go out in the press next week and with a launch out to all of our elected officials and the official channels. So you all as our core community are the first to see it, but it will be available to the public and with specific outreaches you're talking about. Thank you for the question. And we'll talk more about implementation in a minute. Let's move on, and I want to give the floor to Hamilton and Maureen for a couple minutes. We'd love to hear from you. As I mentioned at the beginning, these are the consultants who helped shepherd us through the roadmap process. And so over to you both.
Great, thank you. I'm Hamilton Simons Jones, and Maureen and I are actually based in New Orleans, so it's still morning here. And thanks to, I think, y'all on the Panhandle too. So good morning. We've just had the honor of really being able to help facilitate parts of this process, guide parts of it. We facilitated the retreat. and then help kind of capture some of it on paper. And, Maureen and I have the chance to work on early childhood systems in states across the South, and really with organizations doing this work across the country. And there really is something special happening in Florida, and something special happening with the Future Project in particular. Typically these kinds of plans often get developed by a handful of government employees who work in a Department of Education early learning system. Sometimes there's a handful of advocates that are involved in that process. Very rarely is it really that the teachers and the providers and the parents that are dealing with the policy decisions that are made on the ground every day that are really driving this process, and the way in which this process has held that value throughout everything, from the listening sessions to the steering committee to who was developing the actions once we determined the goals and direction, really was centering the lived experience, because folks are closest to the problem or closest to the solution. And that is really special, and has been a real honor to be a part of.
Yeah.
Like Madeleine said, we now have a roadmap. And my hope is you will see some of your own ideas reflected in this, and that you will also get the opportunity, that there is not like okay, now this person is going to go do X and that's how this is all going to get implemented. It gets a lot messier as we get into implementation, and it really does take everyone. Some of these are going to be things you can go implement on the local level. Other things are going to be things that you support as we're trying to change a state policy or, move what a practice looks like at the state level. But the roadmap is here to really be used and guide this shared conversation about how we move things forward in early learning for Florida. So I'm going to turn it over to Maureen to share a bit more about the process.
Yeah, it was a beautiful process. And as Hamilton said, often this is what's deemed professionals in this work. And the project management team at Children's Movement was so in it, so insistent that the voices that lead were the voices that are most impacted, being the teachers and the parents. And so then working together in the groups, we all managed different groups. I was working with the Thriving Parent team in particular, and it was just so valuable and important to watch the relationships that all of the steering committee forged with one another, how committed they were to doing this work. This work was on top of their regular jobs. This work was happening in the evenings. And so mothers cooking, taking care of kids, teachers after long draining days, other professionals. It was a beautiful thing to watch how committed what you're seeing in this blueprint comes out of the heart, minds, bodies, and souls of the people that you saw on that screen, and listening to the voices of the community in general. As you can see, so many people being involved. That makes this such a unique thing. It's an embodiment of all of the people that are impacted: businesses, parents, teachers, directors, community-based organizations. So it made it special. And the specialness was if you were able to be present with the commitment of the people showing up and pouring this information in. I think that makes it so unique, so powerful for Florida to have a blueprint that now we get to take that blueprint, and now with more community support, input, et cetera, now how do you get to the implementation of that? And I'm sure that is much of what we're going to begin to talk about next steps in a minute, but I cannot stress how powerful of an experience that was for me as a consultant to be present working on a team that was this committed to people who are most impacted by work, having a voice in the work and what it should look like.
Thank you so much. what a pleasure and blessing to work with both of you. And it just reminds me of what we've said from the beginning. And certainly there were cynics in the room who said, we already know what we need to do. Let's just go do it. And as I said a minute ago, there is something really powerful about having it on paper. But we also knew from the beginning that this was an exercise in relationship, and that we were not going to these rooms to extract information from parents and educators to say we're including their perspective that we took from this meeting. Every one of these meetings that we had, from the listening tour through the community feedback meetings, was about relationship building, was about inviting you into the process and then inviting you to stay. And so it is really heartwarming to see how many of you are still here today. And we've also received word, apparently there was an error that only 100 people were allowed in. And so there were many more who wanted to be here, and we're sorry that they'll have to settle for the recording here, but just want to acknowledge so many people who've taken that invitation to be part of this and build relationships that help us get it done. So Maureen's absolutely right. Next, we talk about what's next. So if we move to the next slide, those of you who are so inclined can scan this QR code. We'll also have a link in the chat, but we have just a form for you to fill out to say, how might you like to be involved as we move to the next steps for implementation? So might you be a leader? Do you want to be part of the planning and prioritization process to move these recommendations? Do you want to be a partner? Is it that your organization can commit to implementing one or more of these recommendations, whether in your community or across the state? Do you want to be an advocate? Do you want to take this roadmap and share it with elected officials in your community? Do you want to be an ambassador to spread the word about the roadmap, to take this to parents, educators, community members, or even the staff in your organization? Do you want to be a champion? If you or your organization is already doing some of what's recommended, and we can take your story, amplify it, and help inspire others to follow suit. It's just so important to remember that before something is a policy, it is a practice. And so some of this may already be happening in pockets throughout the state. We really want to amplify that and use it as a way to push this forward at a wider level. Or might you want to be an ally and just stay connected? We are going to be hosting a series of calls to remain connected, to share some of those stories from our new champions. And so want you to be part of that. And of course, we can share this link with you afterwards if you don't find it in the chat or through this QR code, but want to really invite you all to stay involved. And then if we go to the next slide, we can consider, the movement was committed to this planning process, to the development of this roadmap, but we've also sort of filled out that survey already, so to speak, and are committed to playing a certain role as we move forward. So we will be organizing the next phase of work, creating a spreadsheet to track each recommendation and its implementation, putting together a leadership team that works on the prioritization and just that all of the continued momentum building that needs to happen. We're also from here picking a few priorities that we believe we can move in the 2024 legislative session. And so we'll be communicating about those and sharing what talking points advocates may need for that process. We're also committed to developing a parent advocacy training. Maria mentioned this in her section on thriving parents, that one of the recommendations was to create this. And so we will be working on that this fall, piloting in a couple of communities, and having something that others can use throughout the state. And then we will also create an interactive early learning data dashboard. So there is a lot of data that already exists. There is also some data I think everyone wishes existed, but we maybe don't have the source yet. So this is not about creating any new data, but we want to take everything that exists for early learning and have it in one place, linking back to those sources. So that it is easily seen and accessible by our elected officials, by community members, and also so that there may be some black boxes there of, we don't have this data, boy, do we wish we did, and who might help make sure that we do. And then, as I mentioned earlier, establishing regular community calls, because learning from each other over the course of this project has clearly made a difference, and change has started to come. And so we want to make sure that we have these continued connection points to catalyze the work. And so that is all what we are committed to right now. And as we do that first bullet of organizing the next phase of work, you'll be hearing from us more on that as well. And I think I just saw something pop up in the chat about our babies, about the children 0 to 1, and absolutely, I think Rocio mentioned, we know learning begins before birth. And so as we talk about the early learning system, that is birth to 5. And then if we can move to the next slide, I will turn it back to Rocio.
So I see questions in the chat about what's coming up next. Now you have heard that we are inviting all of you to be part of the next phase of this beautiful project. We really need you. That's what we want to say. We really need you. This is not going to happen if us, the people in this room, and unfortunately the people that were not able to come in today to the room, but will receive the recording of this session, if we are the ones who care, don't do something that haven't been done before, is not going to happen. So that's part of the things that we learned throughout this process, is that us, the people who care, are the ones to go that extra mile. As the parents, we're dedicating their time to put these things together, to put their ideas together. We all, the people who care, need to work together moving forward. And that's the invitation we are doing today. So we want to know what excites you about the Florida Early Learning Roadmap, about what you heard, or about the work that you're doing that connects with what you heard. And please respond in the chat. We really want to hear from you if you have any reactions, any comments, and what is it that you're seeing here that is positive and that we can make things happen together.
Are you taking any questions?
Yes, please.
Yes, Elaine, go ahead, Dr. Lipton.
Yeah, I think it's a very valuable piece of work that's been accomplished. But I think one thing that's extremely important is to begin to think about the connections with K-12 educators. Having all of this information is very, very valuable, very much needed. But K-12 educators, let's even start with the kindergarten teachers and the early childhood teachers within that system. They need to understand how to build and further develop the students that come from, the programs that are being established. And then the second tier of that, which I think is very important, you've got to get to the school site managers, the principals, the assistant principals, the guidance counselors, to understand how to make that connection, because it is that relationship that's going to take all the work effort that you've done and bring it to fruition as a child continues on in school.
Absolutely. What an important point. And you're speaking to me on my older son's second day of kindergarten. So boy, is that fresh in my mind today. Thank you for the reminder. We'll comb through it and see where that fits here, if it's not reflected. Anyone else? I know Rocio said respond in the chat, and we see some of you sharing. If anyone else wants to open your mic, we do have 2 minutes. I see a lot popping up about the Anita Zucker Center and Dr. Knopf, who was on our steering committee, and they are absolutely data whizzes in the early learning space. Well, with that, I think you have the link here to download the full roadmap. If you don't find it, it's on our homepage. If you click on the future project. And we are so glad you're here. Thank you for being part of this, and stay tuned for the next invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
What happened?